Meet Andrew Parker, a polished millionaire CEO known for charm, strategy, and building empires. But nothing in business prepares him for what he sees one warm afternoon at a bustling Houston fair. An 11-year-old girl selling cookies with a spark in her eyes and a charisma hauntingly familiar. Her name is Grace. As Andrew follows a hunch, he uncovers a truth hidden for years. Grace is his daughter. She's been raised by her grandmother, while her mother Claire, Andrew's former love, battles a serious illness. And the reason Andrew never knew? His own brother, Paul, erased the truth to protect the family name. Now, Andrew is forced to choose between boardroom deals and fatherhood, between loyalty and love. As he tries to connect with Grace, she doesn't trust him, assuming he's just another rich man offering charity. Claire, broken but proud, demands answers. And Paul? He's not done manipulating the story. In a world of secrets and power plays, one small box of cookies bearing the word family may hold the key to healing. But can trust be rebuilt when the truth comes too late? A story of forgiveness, fatherhood, and quiet redemption. Subscribe now for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. The air at the Houston Spring Fair buzzed with the hum of laughter, distant carousel music, and the sweet smell of kettle corn. CEO Andrew Parker adjusted his blazer, the tailored charcoal gray feeling out of place among the colorful food trucks and carnival games. He wasn't supposed to be here. A last-minute charity board meeting had gotten rescheduled, and instead of heading back to the hotel, something had pulled him into the fairgrounds. He told himself it was curiosity, but deep down, it felt like fate. He strolled past a balloon artist twisting swords for toddlers, a lemonade stand run by two exhausted teenagers, and a petting zoo that smelled exactly like childhood. Then he saw her. A young girl, no more than 11, stood behind a small folding table covered in clear-wrapped cookie bags and hand-drawn signs. Her long, chestnut hair was half-tied back in a bright yellow ribbon, and she wore a mismatched apron that had clearly seen better days. But it wasn't the cookies that stopped him in his tracks. It was her smile. Bright, disarming, confident. She had dimples, his dimples. Andrew blinked, shook his head slightly, and stepped closer. The closer he got, the more uncanny it became. Her posture, the slight cock of her head, the way she raised one brow when a man tried to haggle her down from $3 to $2. She gave a polite chuckle, leaned forward, and said with poise that shouldn't belong to a child, "Sir, if you want cheaper cookies, try the supermarket." The man laughed, paid full price, and walked off smiling. Andrew stared. He hadn't seen anything like that since he looked in the mirror before a board meeting. "Hi there," he said, approaching the stand. The girl looked up, blinking against the sun. "Hi," she replied, cheerful but alert. "Would you like to try my almond crinkle cookies? They're homemade, no preservatives, just old-fashioned butter and effort." Andrew smiled faintly. "That's a strong pitch." She shrugged. "Gotta sell what you believe in. What's your name?" "Grace," she said proudly, then hesitated. "Grace Thompson." The last name didn't ring any bells, but that voice, that smile. "You here with your parents?" he asked gently. "My grandma's over at the quilt booth. My mom's resting today." Her voice faltered slightly, and Andrew didn't press further. She motioned to the cookies. "I baked these with her recipe. I'm saving up for something special." He looked down at the pile of cookies, neatly packaged with handwritten labels. There was something tender in the way each one was signed, Grace and Claire's Kitchen. Claire. The name hit him like a gust of cold air. Claire Bennett, the girl he'd loved 15 years ago, the one he lost, the one his brother Paul had warned him to stay away from. Suddenly, everything felt upside down. He bought a bag of cookies, almond crinkle, and handed her a crisp 20. She tried to give him change. He refused. Support for good work, he said, smiling. But inside his mind was racing. Back in his car, parked near a church lot, he sat gripping the cookie bag as if it held a secret. Grace, Claire, that smile, those dimples, the confidence, the way she held her ground. Could it be? His phone buzzed. A calendar alert. He was supposed to be on a conference call about a new expansion deal, but instead he found himself scrolling through old contacts, fingers trembling slightly, until he found the name. Mary Bennett, Claire's mother. His thumb hovered over the screen. "Sir," a voice echoed in his memory. Claire's voice from years ago. "If you ever stop seeing me as your equal, don't come back." He hadn't. He never went back. Not after Paul's warnings, not after the messy breakup, not after she stopped calling. But what if she never stopped? What if someone else stopped her? Andrew hit dial. It rang once, twice, then a woman's voice picked up, weary but familiar. "Hello? Mrs. Bennett, it's Andrew. Andrew Parker." There was silence, then a sharp inhale. "I saw a little girl at the fair today," he said slowly, "selling cookies. Her name's Grace. Is she Claire's daughter?" Another silence, this one heavier, as if the past had just walked into the present, uninvited. "Yes," Mary finally said, her voice breaking. "She is. And Claire's not well." Andrew closed his eyes, heart pounding. He had missed 11 years. 11 birthdays, 11 Christmas mornings, 11 bedtimes and scraped knees and butterfly bandages. And now he had a second chance. But could the truth survive the damage already done? He clutched the bag of almond crinkle cookies, his throat tight, his breath unsteady. The label read, "Grace and Claire's Kitchen, baked with love." And just beneath it, in the corner, was a tiny heart drawn in red marker. He stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "I need to see them." The almond cookie bag sat on the passenger seat, untouched. Andrew's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, turning slowly down a quiet residential street on the east side of Houston. The houses here were old, some with peeling paint, others with windows boarded up. It was a far cry from the luxury skyline where he spent most of his days, but it wasn't the worn buildings that rattled him. It was what waited inside one of them, Claire. The name still carried weight in his chest, like a song he hadn't listened to in years, but could hum by heart. And now she was sick. Mary hadn't said how badly, but the tremble in her voice had told him enough. He parked in front of a pale yellow bungalow with a sagging porch and a wind chime that caught the breeze in soft, melancholy tones. He stared at the house, remembering a time when he and Claire used to dream about homes like this, back before family names and boardroom politics stole the innocence from their love. He stepped out. As he reached the door, it opened. A small woman stood in the frame, gray hair tucked into a messy bun, eyes sharp but tired. Mary Bennett. She didn't speak right away, just studied him, as if searching for signs of the boy she once called the one who made my daughter laugh. Andrew broke the silence. "Mrs. Bennett," he said gently, "thank you for taking my call." Mary stepped aside, nodding. "Come in, Andrew. I guess it was time." Inside, the home smelled of cinnamon, dust, and something faintly medicinal. Family photos lined the walls, including one of Claire in college, smiling, radiant. Next to it, a school photo of Grace, beaming in a bright red dress holding a tray of cookies. The resemblance was clearer indoors. Grace wasn't just a reflection of him in smile, she carried Claire's fire, too. Mary led him into the kitchen. It was small, but tidy. A mixing bowl and cookie tray sat drying in the sink beside a folded apron embroidered with G&C's Kitchen. "She bakes every Friday," Mary said, catching him looking. Started when Claire got too tired to help. Andrew swallowed. How bad is she? Mary hesitated, her voice soft. Stage 3. Lungs. She's holding on for grace. He exhaled slowly, fingers tracing the rim of the bowl. I didn't know. I didn't know about any of it. No, Mary said, with a trace of bitterness. You didn't, but maybe you would have, if you hadn't disappeared. He looked up, guilt swimming in his eyes. I didn't disappear. You believed your brother, Mary interrupted. You let Paul tell you Claire wasn't right for your world. I was young, I was stupid, and I regret every day I didn't look back. Mary studied him for a long moment, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, worn envelope. She wrote to you. The week after she found out she was pregnant. She sent it to your office. It came back unopened. Returned by Executive Assistant Discretion. Andrew felt the floor tilt beneath him. He opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, faded ink, but unmistakably Claire's. Every line soaked in hope and fear. At the bottom, she had written, Her name is Grace. Like the gift she is. Please, just come if you can. He closed his eyes. Paul. It had to be him. The one person who always told him Claire would ruin everything. The one who warned she was after the Parker fortune. And now it was clear. Paul hadn't just warned him. He'd stolen 11 years from him. I have to see Claire, Andrew said, his voice breaking. She's at St. Joseph's, room 418, Mary replied. But be gentle. Her strength comes and goes, and she hasn't said your name in years. He nodded, tucking the letter into his jacket pocket like a sacred relic. Just then, small footsteps pattered down the hallway. Grace rounded the corner, holding a stack of cookie bags. Her eyes widened when she saw him again. You, she said with a shy smile. Cookie guy. Andrew smiled back. That's me. You forgot your change. He knelt to her level. I didn't forget. I was making an investment. In what? She asked, tilting her head curiously. In something that matters. Grace looked at him for a long second, unsure what to make of the answer. Then she shrugged and offered him a cookie from the top of the stack. This one broke, so it's free. He took it, heart aching. Best deal I've ever made. As Grace walked off, humming under her breath, Mary turned to him. She doesn't know, she said quietly. About me? About any of it. Andrew looked down at the broken cookie in his hand, its edges crumbling slightly. I'll tell her, he whispered, but not today. The broken cookie still sat on Andrew's dashboard as he pulled into the hospital lot. He hadn't touched it. Couldn't. It felt like a symbol now. Sweet, fragile, and imperfect. Like the connection he'd lost, or maybe never fully had. As he stepped out of the car, the air shifted. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. With each step toward St. Joseph's entrance, his pulse quickened. 11 years was a long silence to break. Inside, the hospital buzzed with quiet urgency. Nurses moved with practiced grace. Monitors beeped steadily from distant rooms. The sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with fading carnations from a lobby bouquet. He held the letter from Claire in his coat pocket, fingers brushing it like a lifeline. Room 418. He paused at the door. Behind it was Claire, not the memory, laughing barefoot on Galveston Beach or sipping coffee in his downtown loft. The real Claire, older, tired, betrayed by time and by him. He knocked softly. A quiet voice answered. Come in. He pushed open the door. Claire lay in bed, thin and pale, her once bright eyes dimmed but unmistakably hers. An IV ran from her arm. Her hair, now streaked with silver, was pulled into a loose braid. She looked up, puzzled at first, then her breath caught. "Andrew?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "Hi, Claire." Her eyes welled with something between disbelief and hurt. She reached for the remote and paused the television, the room falling silent but for the rhythmic beeping beside her. "It's really you," she said, almost to herself. "After all these years." Andrew nodded, unsure if he should sit or run. "I found Grace," he said softly. Claire's jaw clenched. "Of course you did. She's hard to miss, like her father." He tried to smile, but it didn't hold. "I didn't know, Claire. I swear. I never knew she existed." She didn't look at him. "Because you never looked." "No," he said quickly. "I did, at first. After you left, I called. I texted. I even showed up at your apartment." She turned sharply, a tired fire in her gaze. "And then what? You gave up? You believed Paul when he said I was just some girl chasing your last name?" Andrew's chest tightened. "Claire, he told me you'd moved on, that you'd left the country, that I didn't want you in her life," she finished bitterly. "I wrote you, I begged you, and you never answered." He reached into his coat and pulled out the letter. Her letter. "I didn't see this until yesterday," he said, voice raw. "Mary kept it. Paul had intercepted it before it ever reached me." Claire froze, eyes darting to the paper in his hand. Then slowly, she took it. Her fingers trembled as she read the familiar words she had once written in desperation, in hope. "I was scared," she said quietly, tears slipping down her cheek. "Scared to raise her alone. Scared you'd reject us." Andrew sat down beside the bed. "I would never have rejected her. Or you." "You didn't fight," she whispered. "You let your brother dictate our ending." A long silence passed between them, filled only by the steady beep-beep of the monitor. "I'm here now," Andrew said finally, "and I want to be her father. I want to be in her life, if she'll let me." Claire looked at him for a long time. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. "She thinks you're just another guy feeling sorry for a kid selling cookies." He winced. "I know. She's smart and strong." Claire leaned back on the pillow, exhausted. "She's had to be. I've been in and out of the hospital for a year. Mary's done more than I ever could." Andrew nodded slowly. "Let me help. With Claire, with Grace. I don't care what people think. I can't lose more time." Claire closed her eyes, as if weighing a decade's worth of silence. Then, softly, she asked, "Does Paul know you're here?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "Not yet. He won't like it," she warned. "I don't care anymore," he replied. "He's kept enough from me." Claire looked at him then, really looked. The pain was still there, but so was something else. Recognition, familiarity, a memory of what they once had. "She doesn't know you're her father," Claire said. "I didn't tell her." Andrew's breath caught. "Will you let me?" Another pause. "She deserves to know the truth," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "But she also deserves someone who won't walk away." He reached for her hand, gently, reverently. "I won't," he said. "Not this time." She nodded weakly, then turned her head toward the window, where the sun had begun to dip behind the trees. The hallway outside Claire's hospital room still echoed in Andrew's chest as he stepped into the elevator. His hand kept brushing his coat pocket, the one where Claire's letter remained, now folded carefully beside his phone. He didn't know what stung more, her pain, or the fact that someone he trusted had orchestrated the silence. Paul. His older brother, his protector, his partner, the man who, years ago, had convinced him Claire left because she wanted more than Andrew could offer, that it was better to move on. But the letter changed everything. It wasn't just the existence of Grace. It was the betrayal behind it, and Andrew needed proof. By the time he reached his penthouse office, dusk had softened Houston's skyline. The city buzzed below with its usual rhythm, horns, lights, and lives colliding. But Andrew moved through his space like a man unraveling a puzzle no one else could see. He sat at his desk, opened his email archives, and began searching. Old messages with Paul surfaced, dozens of them from the time Claire had disappeared from his life. He scanned them for signs, timestamps, anything. That's when he remembered something odd. Back then, Claire had mentioned she was switching to a new phone. She had said she would text him the new number once she was settled. Andrew had never received it. Or so he thought. He clicked into a hidden folder Paul had once helped him set up, a secondary archive labeled Low Priority. It was meant to filter out noise during the company's busiest years. And there it was, a text-forwarded email, time-stamped 11 years ago. Andrew, this is Claire. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you deserved to know. I'm pregnant. It's yours. Andrew stared at the screen, a sick weight settling in his gut. The email had never been opened. A follow-up message came weeks later. I wanted to tell you in person. I came to your office, but your assistant said you were in Dubai. Paul said it was for the best. I didn't want to believe him. Andrew slumped back in his chair, his breath shallow. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was sabotage. He picked up his phone and called Mary. "Mary, it's Andrew," he said, voice tight. "I need to ask something, and I need the truth." A pause. "I'm listening," she said cautiously. "Did Paul ever speak to you directly about Claire? Around the time she found out she was pregnant?" Another silence. Then, "Yes. He said you were overwhelmed, that you weren't ready to be a father. He told me not to complicate your life further. He gave me money." Andrew closed his eyes. "How much?" "Enough to cover Claire's medical bills for the year. Enough to keep quiet." He felt the floor tilt beneath him. Did Claire know? No. She thought it was from a foundation. She never would have accepted it otherwise. Andrew's voice dropped to a whisper. "Thank you for telling me." After the call, he sat still for a long while. The city lights flickered against the windows, but the room felt darker than ever. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a framed photo. One of him and Paul, arms around each other at a company retreat, laughing over a fire pit. He set it face down. Then, with trembling hands, he forwarded Claire's emails to himself, out of the archive and into the light. The next morning, Andrew waited outside Grace's school. He stayed in his car, watching as she exited the building with a backpack nearly as big as she was. She chatted with a friend, her expression bright, oblivious to the storm brewing in the adult world. When she finally noticed him through the window, her brow furrowed. She walked over cautiously. "You again?" she said through the open car window. Andrew offered a smile. "Just hoping to ask if I could walk you to your grandma's today." She hesitated. "You're not a stranger, but you're not a friend either." "That's fair," he said gently, "but I'm hoping to change that." Grace folded her arms. "Why?" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes they miss out on the most important people in their lives because of things they never knew." She didn't reply, but she didn't walk away either. "Did my mom send you?" she asked finally. "No, your mom and we knew each other a long time ago." "Like dating?" Andrew chuckled softly. "Yeah, like dating." She looked at him for a long beat, as if trying to solve a puzzle written in his face. "You have her eyes," she murmured, "but your smile's more like mine." Andrew's heart stuttered. "Can I tell you a story?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Will it be long?" "Only if you want it to be." She nodded once. "Okay, but you have to walk slow. I don't like when people rush." Andrew smiled. "Deal." They began walking, side by side. As they rounded the corner, a bakery flyer fluttered from her backpack. It landed near his shoe. He picked it up. A picture of a cookie hand-drawn in marker. Underneath, it read in careful handwriting, "Cookies made with love. All proceeds help my mom. Grace's stand at the fair." He folded the paper gently and tucked it into his jacket. The paper cookie flyer still sat on the dashboard as Andrew parked outside the modest duplex where Grace lived with her grandmother. It was creased from the wind, smudged by his fingers, but he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. The hand-drawn cookie. The words, "Help my mom." It said more than a business pitch. It was a cry for stability, a child's quiet courage in the face of illness and uncertainty. He stepped out, the setting sun casting a golden hue over the quiet Houston street. As he reached the porch, Grace was already there, sitting on the steps with her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tightly. "You followed me," she said without looking up. "I stayed behind. Just wanted to be sure you got home safe." She glanced at him, skeptical. "You rich guys always think you can fix things with cookies and smiles." Andrew didn't smile. Instead, he sat beside her on the steps, careful to leave space between them. "I didn't come here to fix anything," he said quietly. "I came because I missed 11 years of someone's life, and I'm trying to understand why." Grace eyed him, then turned away. "You talked to Grandma?" He nodded. "And I learned a lot. I should have known a long time ago." Silence stretched between them. The hum of a distant lawnmower buzzed faintly in the air. "Do you like cookies?" she asked suddenly. Andrew blinked. "I do." "Then why didn't you buy any? Everyone else did. Even a fireman bought 2 boxes. He smiled, just barely. "I didn't want cookies. I wanted to know your name." Grace gave a small shrug. "It's on the box." Another pause. Andrew reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a single cookie wrapped in a napkin, the one she'd handed him at the fair, the one he hadn't eaten yet. "I kept this," he said softly. "Not because it's sweet, but because someone brave handed it to me with hope in her eyes." Her expression faltered. "You talk like one of those movie dads." "Maybe because I'm trying to learn how to be one," he replied. That caught her off guard. Her voice was quieter now. "I don't need charity." Andrew shook his head gently. "Grace, I don't see you as a charity case." She looked away, unsure how to respond. "I see you," he continued, "as someone smart, tough, and funny. Someone who reminded me of myself when I was your age. Only you had the strength to stand on your own." Grace sniffed. "You don't know me." "No, I don't," he said honestly, "but I'd like to." She didn't reply, but she didn't get up to leave either. Just then, the screen door creaked open. Mary stepped out, her apron dusted with flour, brows furrowed. "I thought I heard voices," she said. "Andrew." He rose to his feet. "Mary, you want to come in?" He glanced down at Grace, who gave a tiny, reluctant nod. Inside, the living room smelled of sugar and lemon. Old family pictures lined the mantel, Claire as a teenager, Claire in a graduation gown, and one photo of Grace as a toddler, eyes wide, holding a teddy bear. Andrew stared at it for a long moment. "She looks just like Claire." Mary folded her arms. "She's her mother's girl." They sat around the small kitchen table. Grace excused herself quietly to her room, leaving Andrew and Mary alone. "She's tough," Mary said, pouring tea. "But you saw that." "I did." "She's also scared," Mary added. "About Claire. About what happens next. We all are." Andrew exhaled slowly. "I want to be in her life." Mary studied him. "And what about Claire? I want to see her too, but only if she wants to see me." The older woman was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to a drawer, pulled out a small, weathered envelope, and placed it on the table. "She wrote this for you. Years ago. Paul said he'd pass it along." Andrew stared at the envelope. The handwriting on the front, Andrew, made his chest ache. He opened it with trembling fingers. If you're reading this, it means something changed. Maybe the truth came out. Maybe you found your way back. I never stopped hoping. Grace is everything I couldn't be. Brave, honest, and full of light. If she smiles at you, it's real. Don't waste it, and don't let her believe she's unwanted. He folded the letter gently, holding it in both hands as if it were made of glass. I won't, he whispered. Not again. Mary's voice softened. Claire's at St. Jude's, room 418. She's been waiting a long time, Andrew. He stood slowly, the letter still warm in his hand. As he walked to the door, Grace peeked out from behind it. Will you be back? She asked, her voice small. He turned, meeting her gaze. If you want me to be. Grace didn't say anything, but her fingers slipped into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled sticker, one from her cookie stand. She walked forward, pressed it into his palm. Then don't be late. The sticker Grace gave him stayed in Andrew's hand the whole ride to the hospital. It was wrinkled, bright pink, with a crooked heart drawn in marker across the center. Simple, honest, like her. As he stepped through the sliding glass doors of St. Jude's, that heart weighed heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. He passed the front desk, murmuring Claire's name, and was pointed to room 418. Each step down the corridor tightened something in his chest. The polished floors reflected the sterile glow of overhead lights. The faint beeping of monitors and the quiet shuffle of nurses only made the air feel heavier. He paused outside her door. His hand hovered over the handle. Would she be angry? Would she even recognize him? He took a breath, the sticker still tucked between his fingers like a talisman, and knocked once. Come in, a voice called, soft but unmistakable. He opened the door. Claire lay in the hospital bed, pale but not fragile. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid, her skin thin, but her eyes, those deep, clear eyes, hadn't changed. They locked onto his with a mix of disbelief and quiet fury. Andrew, she said, the word cutting the silence like a blade. Claire, he breathed, stepping closer. You look. Don't lie, she said flatly. I look like someone who's been waiting for a ghost. He sat down, leaving space between them. I didn't know, he said gently. I swear to you, I didn't know about Grace. I didn't know you tried to reach me. Her jaw tensed. Because Paul made sure of that. His throat tightened. He deleted your messages. I found one this morning, buried in my old account. I should have seen through him. She looked out the window, her voice suddenly hoarse. I kept waiting for you to call, to show up. I thought maybe the Andrew I loved wouldn't just disappear. I didn't disappear, he said desperately. I was pushed, and I let it happen. That's on me. Her gaze returned to his. Why are you here now? He hesitated, then quietly, because I saw her. I didn't know who she was at first. Just a little girl selling cookies with this spark in her eyes, like someone I used to know. Then I saw it. The way she raised her eyebrows when she was curious. The way she folded her arms when she was stubborn. It was you, and it was me. Claire's lips trembled just for a second. I'm not here to fix everything in one visit, he continued. I'm here to ask, no, to beg, for a chance to make up for lost time. She turned away. Grace is careful with her heart. She's been let down by too many people already. I won't be one of them. He reached into his coat and held out the sticker. She gave me this. Claire took it, running her thumb across the uneven heart. I didn't ask her to. She did it on her own, he added. She's not ready to trust me, I get that. But she's curious, and she wants something to believe in. Claire looked back at him, tears welling in her eyes now. She asked me once if her dad was a soldier, or dead, or in space. That hit him like a punch. I told her you were a good man, who never got the letter, Claire whispered. He blinked, struggling to speak. I thought protecting her meant shielding her from your absence, but it hurt her anyway. Let me be there now, he said, voice raw, for however long you need. I'll earn her trust, and yours. Claire closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her voice was softer. She loves baking. She says cookies make people feel safe. He smiled. She gave me one. Still haven't eaten it. You should, she said. It's made with lemon zest and a whole lot of attitude. They both laughed, quietly. Andrew leaned forward. Claire, how bad is it? She didn't answer right away, just stared at the sticker. Some days are better than others, she said. Some aren't. A long pause. If something happens to me, she started. Don't, he said firmly. Don't go there yet. But if it does, she continued, I need to know she won't end up in Paul's hands. He's already circling. Andrew clenched his jaw. He won't get her. I'll fight. I'll do whatever it takes. Claire studied him closely. Then don't wait, she said quietly. Start now. He stood, leaned in, and gently kissed her forehead. I'm sorry I wasn't there, he whispered, but I'm here now. She closed her eyes again, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. She likes sunflowers, Claire said. They remind her of hope. He nodded. I'll bring her a field of them. The text from Paul still lingered on Andrew's screen as he sat motionless in his car. You're not fit to raise a child, and I'll prove it. The words pulsed with menace, even without an exclamation mark. Outside the hospital, the world carried on. Nurses wheeled patients beneath swaying trees. A father handed his daughter a juice box. A jogger passed with headphones on. But inside Andrew, something had shifted. He had expected resistance from Claire, guilt, maybe hesitation. But this was war, and it was coming from his own blood. He tapped the phone, rereading Paul's message again. Not just a threat, a promise. Later that evening, Andrew stood on the balcony of his condo overlooking the Houston skyline, phone to his ear. The city glittered beneath him, indifferent to the storm brewing in his life. Marcus, it's me, he said as soon as his lawyer picked up. I need to prepare for a custody battle. A pause on the line. Then, you're serious? As serious as I've ever been. My brother's coming for Grace. I thought Paul was backing off. What changed? He's accusing me of being unfit, and he's got money, influence, more than enough to sway the wrong people. Marcus exhaled. All right, we'll get ahead of it. But Andrew, custody law's not just about who has more resources. It's about history, relationship, consistency. And right now, he's got more of that. Andrew's hand clenched the balcony rail. Then we change that, he said softly, starting now. The next morning, Andrew arrived early at Grace's school with a handmade sign that read, Go Grace, in crooked, bright letters. Parents gave him curious glances. A few whispered. One recognized him. Isn't that the guy from Forbes? He didn't care. He stood by the field during Grace's relay event, clapping louder than anyone. When she crossed the finish line, she barely acknowledged him, but he saw the flicker, a glance, the tiniest smile. Later, outside the school gates, Mary approached him, holding Grace's hand. You're early, Mary said, guarded. I wanted to see her run, Andrew replied. She didn't expect you. I know, but I'll keep showing up. Mary hesitated, then stepped aside. Walk us home if you want. As they passed a small playground, Grace finally broke the silence. You cheered really loud. Andrew smiled. I meant every clap. You didn't even know I was in the race. I didn't. I asked around. Grace glanced up at him. Are you trying to impress me? I'm trying to get to know you. She gave a small shrug, then kicked at a rock on the sidewalk. Mary spoke gently. She's not used to men sticking around. I know, Andrew said. then turned to Grace. "But I'm not going anywhere. Not this time." That night, Paul arrived unannounced. He barged into Andrew's condo without knocking, as if still expecting to be obeyed. "You're making a fool of yourself," Paul said, throwing a folder onto the marble countertop. Andrew stayed seated. Paul continued. "Do you even know what it takes to raise a kid, let alone one who barely knows you? I know it starts with showing up." Paul laughed coldly. "Claire's dying. You think you can just swoop in and play hero?" Andrew stood now, his voice low and firm. "I think I can love her, and I think she deserves that." Paul stepped closer. "You think love wins court cases? I've already filed for temporary guardianship. I'll have 10 affidavits by Monday saying you're unstable." Andrew didn't flinch. "And I'll have Claire's voice, Grace's drawings, the truth." Paul sneered. "You're forgetting who controls this family's legacy. You're just a headline. I'm the foundation." Andrew walked over to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a simple envelope, and handed it to Paul. "What's this?" "An affidavit from Claire. Pre-signed, in case she couldn't speak for herself." Paul's face darkened. "Get out," Andrew said quietly. "Before you say something you can't walk back." Paul stared for a moment longer, then snatched the envelope, turned, and slammed the door behind him. Back at her apartment, Claire sat up in bed with Grace curled beside her. "She said he brought sunflowers today," Claire told Mary. "3 of them. 1 for each of us." Mary raised an eyebrow. "He's trying." Claire looked down at the drawing Grace had made, a cookie with arms. It had a speech bubble that read, "Family means feeding the heart." "He might actually mean it," Claire whispered. The courtroom air was cold despite the mid-morning sun streaming through the tall windows. Andrew sat beside Marcus, his lawyer, hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white. Across the aisle, Paul leaned back confidently in his tailored navy suit, his smirk barely concealed. It was a private hearing, but the stakes felt public, like the entire legacy of the Parker name sat in the balance. Judge Halverson, a woman in her late 60s with wise, searching eyes, reviewed the file slowly. When she finally looked up, her gaze moved between Andrew and Paul like she was peering past their arguments into their character. "Mr. Parker," she said, addressing Andrew, "you've requested a primary custody of Grace under emergency motion, but your business obligations raise concerns. Why now?" Andrew stood. His voice, though calm, carried a quiet conviction. "Because I failed once. 10 years ago, I let someone else decide what was best for me. For Claire, for Grace, I will not let that happen again." The judge nodded slowly. "And the multi-million-dollar Houston redevelopment project you're leading, are you still involved?" Andrew looked down for just a moment, then met her eyes. "No, Your Honor. I withdrew this morning." A gasp rippled through the room. Even Paul's smirk faltered. Judge Halverson leaned forward. "You walked away from a $200 million deal?" Andrew's reply came gently. "Some things are worth more than money. Grace is my daughter, and she only gets one childhood. She deserves to spend it with someone who puts her first, not behind a desk or a quarterly report." 2 days earlier, the choice hadn't been so clear. Andrew had been at the conference table inside Parker Global's towering glass headquarters. Investors from Singapore, London, and New York were waiting to sign the final term sheets. The redevelopment deal would put the family company on a new global map. But his phone had vibrated, Claire's name lighting up the screen. Her message was short. "Grace asked who gets to decide where she lives. I didn't know how to answer." Something shifted inside him then. A voice he hadn't listened to in years whispered, "You already know the answer." He stood abruptly. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the stunned room, "I'm sorry, but I won't be moving forward." One of the executives scoffed. "Is this a negotiation tactic?" "No," Andrew said, grabbing his coat. It's a family decision." Back in the courtroom, Paul's attorney tried to pivot. "Your Honor, my client has been Grace's emergency guardian for several years under Claire's medical guidance. Andrew has no parental history, no primary residence suited for a child, no consistency." But Judge Halverson wasn't finished with Andrew. "Do you have a space prepared for Grace?" "Yes, ma'am," Andrew said. "I converted my guest room into a bedroom for her, and I'm working with Mary to ensure she stays in the same school. And what does Grace want?" The question hung in the air. That evening, Andrew sat with Grace on a park bench just outside her apartment. She had a notepad open, drawing something with fierce focus. The sun had dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across the playground. "I heard you quit your job," Grace said, not looking up. "I quit a project," Andrew corrected softly. "Not everything. Just the thing that would have taken me far away." She drew another line. "Why?" "Because I want to be close to you." Grace paused her pencil. "Everyone says they'll show up," she whispered, "but they don't. I'm not everyone." Silence stretched between them. Then, Grace tore a sheet from her notebook and handed it to him. It was a rough sketch of 3 cookies, each with legs and arms. One had glasses, one had a bandage on its knee. The third wore a tie. Across the top, in wobbly handwriting, it read, "Family means we stay even when it gets tough." Andrew blinked, the paper shaking slightly in his hands. "Did you draw this for me?" Grace gave the tiniest nod. "Can I keep it?" he asked, voice catching. She smiled, the first real one he'd seen from her. "I made it for you." Back in court, Marcus handed Judge Halverson the drawing, now gently framed. "She gave this to my client yesterday," Marcus said. "We believe it speaks louder than any affidavit." The judge studied it carefully, then closed the file. "This court will require further evaluation," she said. "But today, I grant temporary shared custody with physical placement alternating weekly, beginning with Mr. Parker." Andrew exhaled deeply, emotion flickering in his throat. Paul stood without a word and walked out, jaw clenched. Outside, Andrew stepped into the crisp autumn air, where Mary stood waiting with Grace. "You okay?" Mary asked. He looked at Grace, who was bouncing slightly on her heels. "I think I am," he said, smiling. Grace stepped forward and slipped her hand into his. "I'll bring my sketchbook," she whispered. The autumn wind rustled through the trees as Andrew stepped into his condo that evening, Grace's backpack slung over one shoulder. The place looked different now, less like a bachelor CEO's residence, more like something warm was taking root. A pink toothbrush beside his own, a little pair of sneakers by the door, crayon marks smudged faintly on the marble counter where Grace had tried to draw her dream kitchen while he cooked spaghetti last night. It was the first weekend Grace stayed with him since the custody hearing, and for once, Andrew wasn't thinking about stock options or quarterly reports. He was thinking about whether she liked strawberries in her pancakes. As he unzipped her backpack to pull out her school folder, something else tumbled out. Small, square, and wrapped in wax paper. A cookie box. On top was a yellow Post-it. In her handwriting, a little shaky but confident, were 3 simple words. "For my dad." Andrew froze. His breath caught. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The box was decorated with doodles, tiny hearts, stick figures of a man and a girl holding hands, and a smiling cookie in between them. He blinked hard. Then he opened it. Inside were 3 cookies, each carefully shaped and frosted. One was a chocolate chip, his favorite. One was red velvet, her favorite. And the third? Oatmeal raisin, just like the ones Claire used to bake when she couldn't sleep. Beneath them was another note, folded carefully. "Thank you for choosing me. Grace." The message hit him like a wave. After everything, the court battle, Paul's manipulations, the lost years, his daughter was telling him, You matter to me. We're a family now." He sat on the couch, clutching the box, overwhelmed by how something so small could carry so much weight. That night, Grace emerged from the bathroom in pajamas 2 sizes too big, his old Stanford hoodie bunched around her knees. "Is it okay if I read here?" she asked, holding up a worn book. "Of course," Andrew said, scooting over so she could curl beside him. "That's your spot now." She nestled in, her head resting against his shoulder. "I left something for you," she said shyly. "I saw," Andrew whispered. "It's the best thing anyone's ever given me." She smiled, cheeks pink. "Even better than that sports car in your garage?" "Way better," he said, wrapping an arm around her. "That car never called me Dad." Grace giggled, then turned serious. "Do you think Mom will be okay?" Andrew paused, thinking of Claire's tired eyes the last time he visited her in the hospital. She had grown paler, but still carried herself with quiet grace. The chemo had taken her hair, but not her resolve. "I think your mom's stronger than anyone I know," he said honestly. "But no matter what happens, you have me. Always." Grace nodded, eyes misty. Then she reached over to the coffee table, grabbed the last cookie, and broke it in half. "Share?" she whispered. And just like that, something sacred passed between them, not made of DNA or court documents, but trust. The next morning, Andrew stood at the door, watching Grace run into the arms of Mary and Claire outside the hospital. He waved, smiling, but stayed behind. This was her time. Mary came up the steps a few minutes later. "She brought the box?" "She did," Andrew said. "I'll keep it forever." Mary nodded, her voice quiet. "She's been saving those cookies all week. Every night after dinner she'd ask me if I thought it was too soon, if she could trust you." His heart clenched. "And what did you say?" "I told her to trust her own heart," Mary said. "And Andrew, she did." They stood in silence for a moment before Mary continued. "Claire wants to see you later. She asked me to tell you to come. Alone." Andrew looked over at the car where Claire sat with the door open, Grace tucked into her lap. "I'll be there," he said. That evening, when Andrew entered the hospital room, Claire was sitting up, her face pale but radiant. A silk scarf wrapped her head. Her eyes softened as she looked at him. "You made it." "I never left," he replied quietly. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. "Grace told me about the cookies," she said. "She said you cried." Andrew chuckled. "I did. I think I still am." They both fell into a soft silence. Then Claire reached into the drawer beside her and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this before the custody hearing," she said, "in case things didn't go well. I didn't want you to forget what matters." She handed him the letter. "To the father of my child," it began. Andrew didn't finish it right away. He held it gently, like it was made of glass. "Claire," he said, voice hoarse, "I can't change the years we lost, but I can show up now, for her, for you." She smiled faintly. "You already are." Later that night, back in his condo, Andrew placed the cookie box on a high shelf in his study. Next to it, he set the letter, sealed again in its envelope, symbols of what had been broken and what was being rebuilt. Family. The morning sun filtered through the hospital room windows, casting soft gold over the beige walls. Andrew stood by Claire's bedside, Grace's pink backpack slung over his shoulder. Claire was propped up on her pillows, looking more alert than she had in days, but still tired, her scarf delicately tied over her thinning hair. She looked at him, eyes steady. "Take her to school today," she said quietly. "Not as a guest, Andrew, as her father." The words echoed in his chest deeper than he expected. He gave a small nod, trying to keep his composure. "I will," And I'll be there every morning after that, too, if you'll let me." Claire smiled faintly. "One day at a time." They both knew what she meant. In the car, Grace tapped her fingers on her lunchbox. "Are you sure my shoes match?" she asked, legs swinging under the seat. "Perfectly," Andrew said, adjusting the rearview mirror so he could see her eyes. "And you'll walk me in?" "If you want me to." Grace paused, then whispered, "I do." The parking lot buzzed with the usual chaos of parents, buses, and morning chatter. Andrew's hand instinctively reached for Grace's as they crossed, but she took his first. Inside, other kids stared. A few whispered. "Is that your dad?" one girl asked. Grace glanced up at Andrew, then back at her classmate. "Yes," she said proudly. "He's new." Andrew knelt beside her by the cubbies. "You've got your homework?" "Yep." "Lunch?" She nodded. "Confidence?" Grace smiled. "Always." She leaned in and gave him a quick hug, surprising them both. Then she disappeared through the classroom door, her ponytail bouncing. Andrew stood there a moment longer, breathing in the moment. Then he turned and left, but not without glancing back once more. That afternoon, Claire's hospital room smelled of lavender and lemon, thanks to Mary's diffuser. Claire was sketching something in a journal when Andrew arrived. She looked up, studied his face. "Well?" "She held my hand," he said, smiling softly. Claire closed the journal. "That's big." He sat beside her, unsure how close he should get. "Claire," he said after a long pause, "this feels like the start of something, and I don't know how to do it perfectly, but I want to learn." Claire looked away, then back. "I believe you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the cookie box Grace had made. It was slightly dented from the car ride, but still whole. "She gave me this," he said, with a note that said, "Family." Claire's eyes shimmered. She used to save the best cookies for her father, even when she didn't know who that was. Andrew blinked back emotion. "I don't deserve either of you, not really." Claire reached out, her fingers grazing his hand. "You're here now. That matters more than you know." Later that week, Andrew found himself in an unfamiliar situation, sitting on a folding chair in a tiny school auditorium beside Mary, waiting for Grace's class performance. He was still in his work suit, clearly overdressed among the other parents in jeans and sneakers. Mary leaned over. "You'll get used to this. PTA meetings, bake sales, recorder concerts. I once negotiated a merger over dinner with the Prime Minister of Singapore," Andrew whispered. "But this has me sweating," Mary chuckled. "Welcome to the real world." The curtain rose. Grace walked to the front with two other kids and began reciting lines about the moon and tides. Her voice trembled at first, but then she spotted Andrew in the crowd. He gave her a thumbs up. She smiled, and continued, with more confidence. After the show, as families gathered in the hallway, Andrew crouched next to Grace. "You were incredible," he said. Grace beamed. "You really think so?" "I do," he said, "and not just at science night." He reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in brown paper. Grace tore it open carefully. It was a small sketch pad, embossed with her name in gold. "For your dreams," he said, "every one of them." She hugged him again, longer this time. Claire stood nearby, watching. She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes, like someone holding a beautiful photograph, knowing it was taken in fading light. Later, as Andrew drove Claire back to the hospital, the silence between them held weight. Not discomfort, but something tender. "She needs you," Claire said, staring out the window. "She always has." "I need her too," Andrew admitted. Claire's voice softened. "She's forgiving. More than I ever was." Andrew glanced at her, the side of her face bathed in the sunset light. "You had every reason not to be." She looked at him then. "But I am. I forgive you, Andrew. For everything." He gripped the wheel tighter. "I don't expect us to be what we were." Claire smiled faintly. "We aren't, But we can be something better. That night, as Andrew tucked Grace in, she handed him another note. This one was smaller, scribbled in purple ink. "Thanks for staying." He kissed her forehead. "Forever," he said. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with tension, hushed voices and rustling papers punctuated by the occasional slam of a door. Andrew sat on a hard bench, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His tie was loosened, his jaw set. He wasn't nervous, not for himself, but for what this day would mean for Grace, for Claire. Claire sat beside him in her wheelchair, pale but composed, wearing a soft gray sweater that brought out the blue in her eyes. She'd insisted on coming, despite the doctor's protests. "My daughter's future is on the line," she'd said. "I won't be absent for that." They both looked up as Mary returned from a nearby office, phone in hand, her expression unreadable. "Well?" Andrew asked, his voice low. Mary sat beside Claire and gave a slow nod. "We got it." Claire exhaled sharply. Andrew leaned in. "The messages?" Mary handed over a printed transcript. Paul's deletion wasn't complete. Claire's texts are archived on her provider's backup server. They were able to retrieve the entire thread. Andrew took the papers with trembling fingers. There it was, Claire's messages, begging for contact. The dates, the unanswered attempts, the final message. "If you see this, please know you have a daughter. Her name is Grace." Claire looked away. "It still hurts, knowing I tried, that he silenced me." Andrew squeezed her hand gently. "Not anymore." Inside the hearing room, Paul sat stiffly at the long table, flanked by his lawyer. His suit was crisp, his expression smug. He glanced toward Andrew and offered a slight nod, as if this were all still a negotiation he could win. But when Claire entered, supported by Mary and Andrew, Paul's mask cracked. His eyes darted to the judge, to the documents in the bailiff's hand. Andrew stood. "Your Honor, we request to submit newly recovered evidence regarding this custody dispute. It directly impacts the integrity of past communication and the credibility of Mr. Paul Parker." The judge raised an eyebrow, nodding for the papers. Paul's lawyer stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. These documents were obtained without—" "They're from Claire Monroe's phone records," Andrew interrupted, voice firm. "They were legally requested, and the carrier confirmed authenticity." The judge scanned the transcript. A long silence stretched. Then he looked at Paul. "Mr. Parker, do you deny interfering with this communication?" Paul adjusted his tie. "I was protecting my brother. At the time, I believed it was in the best interest of our family." Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "You decided for all of us." The judge glanced at her, then at Andrew. "Mr. Parker, why didn't you see these messages earlier?" "Because I trusted my brother," Andrew said quietly, "and it cost me 10 years with my daughter." After the session recessed, Paul remained in the courtroom, his posture stiff, jaw clenched. Outside, Andrew, Claire, and Mary stood under the portico steps, Grace twirling nearby with her backpack swinging from her arm. "Did we win?" Grace asked. Claire smiled. "We didn't lose. That's enough for now." Just then, Paul stepped outside. The smugness was gone. His shoulders sagged, and the weight of everything he'd done seemed to finally land. He approached Andrew slowly. "You had everything, Andrew," Paul said. "The company, the spotlight. I just wanted to protect something for once." Andrew didn't answer at first. He looked to Claire, then to Grace. "She didn't need protection from me," Andrew said evenly. "She needed her father, and you took that from her." Paul swallowed hard. "I never meant to hurt her." Andrew's eyes softened, but only slightly. "But you did. And now she has to live with it. We all do." Grace walked toward them, clutching a drawing in her hand. She paused in front of Paul. "This was supposed to be for my dad," she said, "but I want you to see it too." She handed him the page. a crayon sketch of 3 stick figures, one with long brown hair, one with a briefcase, and one with glasses. "You're the one with the glasses," she said quietly. "But you're not in the middle anymore." Paul looked at the drawing, blinking. "She's moved me to the side." "She sees the truth now," Claire said. Paul handed the picture back. "She should keep it." Grace shook her head. "No, it's yours, so you remember." That night, the Parker Estate Board voted to restructure its leadership. Paul was asked to step down temporarily. The final motion came from Andrew himself. "I don't want revenge," Andrew said in the boardroom, "but I do want accountability." Paul didn't argue. Back at Claire's apartment, Andrew tucked Grace into bed. She handed him her journal, one she'd started after he appeared in her life. "Can you read this page?" she asked. Andrew sat beside her, flipping to the tabbed section. The page read, "Today, I learned that real dads aren't perfect, but they show up, and they stay." His throat tightened. "Grace." She looked up. "Are you staying?" He nodded slowly. "Forever, if you'll have me." Her arms wrapped around his neck. "Then I guess we're family now." The scent of cinnamon, brown sugar, and fresh-baked hope drifted through the air as the last wooden shelf was nailed into place. Sunlight streamed through the large front windows of the newly painted shop, casting golden light across the polished counters and handwritten chalkboard sign that read, "Grace and Claire's A Community Bakery." Andrew stood beside the window with his sleeves rolled up, brushing sawdust off his shirt. He glanced across the room and smiled, really smiled, as Grace adjusted the jars of cookies on the display rack, lining each one with care. Claire, leaning on a crutch but moving steadily now, set down a tray of lemon bars. "We might have overbaked," she said with a wry grin. "The kitchen smells like a sugar tornado." Andrew chuckled softly. "I'll take a tornado over a boardroom any day." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Coming from a man who once negotiated a $10 billion acquisition over seared tuna?" He smiled, then grew thoughtful. "All the deals I've made, none of them filled me like this place does." She looked at him for a long beat. "It's not just the place, Andrew. It's the people in it." Grace piped up from the counter. "So, does this mean you'll be the official dishwasher or what?" He bowed with mock formality. "At your service, head baker Grace." They laughed. Easy, unforced. For once, nothing felt broken. That morning marked the soft opening of the bakery. No press releases, no ribbon cutting. Just neighbors, the scent of warm bread, and handwritten notes on napkins thanking them for being here. Mary ran the cash register with surprising flair. A group of kids lined up outside with wide eyes clutching crumpled bills and pocket change. "Can I really have one for free?" a boy asked, pointing at a peanut butter cookie. Grace nodded. "1 cookie per person, no questions asked." His eyes lit up. "Then, can I take one for my mom, too?" She glanced at Claire. Claire smiled and gave a nod. "2 cookies," Grace confirmed, sliding the bag across the counter. "Tell your mom I said hi." Andrew watched from the back. This was Grace's idea, her way of giving back. "A bakery where no one walks out empty-handed," she'd said when they first drew up plans. He remembered the day she'd handed him that cookie tin, the note inside reading, "Family." This was that note in physical form, tangible, sweet. Around noon, Andrew stepped outside, needing a breath. The Texas sun was warm on his skin. A woman passing by paused. "Is this your place?" she asked. "My daughter's," he said proudly. "I just build shelves." The woman smiled. "Well, whatever it is, it smells like healing." He looked up at the painted sign again, then down at the sidewalk, where chalk drawings of cookies and hearts decorated the pavement. Grace had made them with local kids during setup. One heart had the words, "Welcome home, Dad." He knelt down and touched the chalky lettering. Claire stepped out behind him, carrying a thermos of coffee. Still surprised she wrote that. Andrew looked at her, emotion tightening his voice. Every day. They sat on the front bench, sipping coffee, watching the slow stream of visitors. Have you thought about going back? She asked softly. To the company? He shook his head. Not yet. Not while this feels more meaningful. She studied him. You changed, Andrew. I had to, he said, glancing at her. Losing 10 years? You don't come out the same. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. I've been saving this. Wasn't sure if I ever would give it to you. Inside was a photo. Old, slightly faded. Claire, young and radiant, holding a baby with Andrew's unmistakable smile. He stared, eyes moist. I never saw this. I didn't have the chance. Until now. He held the photo like it was made of glass. Thank you. That evening, after the last customer left, Grace curled up in one of the booths and drew in her notebook. Crayons spilled across the table. She looked up at Andrew. Do you think we'll always be together now? He sat beside her, pulling her close. Nothing will ever keep me away again. She tilted her head. Not even $1 million deal? He smirked. Not even $1 billion one. Claire dimmed the lights. Okay, kiddo. Time to clean up. Grace stood and handed her latest drawing to Andrew, a picture of the three of them standing in front of the bakery. Above their heads floated the words, Love makes the recipe. Andrew swallowed hard. Claire leaned in, her voice soft. You okay? He looked at them, his daughter and the woman who'd carried both heartbreak and hope, and nodded. I think, he said slowly, this is the first time I know what real success feels like.